to do exercise, you don't need to buy some expensive equipment. You just need yourself a nice pair of comfortable shoes that you can use for longer periods of time, and you can just go and explore. This morning I went running all the way to the airport that you guys have here close by, and it was nice, you know. That's a very nice way of starting your day. And if these walks are long, there's more benefit to it. Now, if you're not used to walking, just take your time, start building up your resistance so you're able to do that. And light is very important because we were talking about it yesterday, how that bright light is an essential ingredient for you to secrete that serotonin. And something important is that this bright light should be used 10 minutes upon awakening. That's what the research showed. That is the best time to get yourself that bright light, and that effect is going to last the whole day. So make this a habit. So what can we do about this? So we can get some nice bright light 10 minutes after waking up? Well, if you put your shoes on and you go outside for your walk, then you get your exercise, you get your light, and you get your nice fresh air all at once. And you will start your day in the best possible way. Now, if you're going to use one of those bright light boxes, I recommend you have something 10,000 lux or 2,500 if you're going to be using the blue light spectrum. And something that happens when you are exposing yourself to bright light is that you are affecting all the way to the hormonal system. There is a hormone called the luteinized hormone, or abbreviated as LH. And this hormone is very important for both males and females. In females, this hormone actually helps women to regularize their menstrual periods. So women that have irregular periods benefit from exposing themselves to this bright light 15 to 30 minutes each morning. And in that way, you're going to settle that better. For males, the advantage with this is that LH is linked with testosterone. So if you are able to increase your LH, you're actually going to be able to help increase your testosterone in your body, which is something nice for males to have. And one of the important things about this is that there is research that show that certain types of erectile dysfunction actually respond to bright light therapy as a result of the increase of testosterone. Now, this is something that probably the manufacturers of Viagra don't want you to know, because Viagra actually will not increase testosterone, while this one has that therapeutic value, plus is able to increase the testosterone. So we're talking about increased muscle mass and some nice secondary effect. So what we need to do is that we need to try to do our exercise outside. I don't know if you have the same saying, but in Norway they have a saying that says, there is not such thing as bad weather. There is bad clothes. I don't know if you guys have that saying here in Iceland. I imagine it would be a good idea to practice it. There's something about that fresh air outside. When you're inside a building and there is no outside air coming in, the quality of the air changes. The air becomes positively charged. And that's why you feel drowsy, your mind doesn't work correctly, if you have been inside for long periods of time without getting some fresh air, and that's because the air from outside has negative ions. Something very interesting. Same thing when you put your heater inside your home, that heater will convert that air into a positive ion. So don't be afraid, even if it's cold, open the window a little bit, let some fresh air come inside, so there is a little bit of circulation of that cold air. Now, something interesting that is happening around the world is that diseases that used to be only of kings and queens started to become normal part of what we call the Western world. But as the Western world culture is being exported to many places on this earth, via music, via arts, via the movies, everybody wants to be like the Western world. And unfortunately, they even want to eat like the Western world. So diseases that used to be unknown or very rare in South America, for example, now heart disease, tremendous killer there. And that's because they're changing their lifestyle. And the same thing with heart disease expanding now into Africa. And this is the worrisome part about these lifestyle diseases. For example, in this published study, they were doing an analysis of the arteries that bring the blood to the heart. Very important arteries. If one of those arteries gets plugged in, you're going to end up with a serious problem like a heart attack. So, look at this one. This is something common in our society, unfortunately. This is the artery. And do you see this? This is plaque of cholesterol. This is an atheroma. Okay? This person has what we call heart disease. How old is he? Is he very old or very young? He is quite young. Now maybe you say, oh, big deal. Look at that, just a little bit there. No problem. It is big deal. Let me tell you why. If you study the physics of how the blood flows inside the arteries, when you do this type of blockage of about a 10% of the diameter, you do not decrease the blood flow by 10%. The equation of it goes that you actually elevate that 10, this is 10%, by the 4th power. Okay? That's the way that fluids behave. So you are dramatically decreasing the blood flow, even though it may look like a little bit, it is a lot. And check this lady. How old is she? 33. Very old? Still quite young, isn't it? But look at how severely diseased this woman is. This is again, this is all the artery, and this is the plaque of atherosclerosis. And let me tell you why this is worrisome for me. Because if you were to talk to this young lady and you started asking her the symptoms of heart disease, she doesn't have a single one of them. Her heart doesn't hurt when she starts doing exercise. She can go up the stairs with no problem. This lady doesn't get pains that start running to her left arm or to her neck, etc., etc. This lady thinks that she is healthy. Yet she is a big-time bomb. This is extremely serious. Again, we said a blockage of 50% does not block the blood by 50%. This is an exponential closure of this artery. And the reason why she's not having symptoms is because the artery is try their best to open up as much as possible to let blood flow there. Yet she is in a big danger of a serious heart attack or another cardiovascular issue. And this is what I found in consultation. Many times, check the laboratories, and the laboratories tell me that something is not right on that person. Yet, a few persons that I tell them, hey, you have to change your lifestyle, what do they say? Oh, me, no, I feel right. No, I don't need to change. Yet, you may not realize it, but you may be in this severe condition, and unless you radically change, you will end up also as a statistic. This is another published study that happened among young people. How young? Between 20 years to 32 years. In this one, they were analyzing the bodies of young people that died of a violent death. So they went ahead and were able to open it up and check the health of those arteries of the heart. What did they find? They found heart disease in 78% of them. Extremely serious, isn't it? And the sad thing is that these type of problems, we're starting to see them younger and younger and younger. In the old days, you would see heart attacks in the 60s, 70s. Now we're seeing heart attacks in people extremely young, like 30 years. Something very, very worse. Now, some people say, but doctor, you don't understand that my problem is that I have bad genes. That's my problem. See, my father died of this, my mom has this disease, my grandmother suffered this and that. Well, that is our old understanding of how genes work. Today, I want to demonstrate to you why you need to change your lifestyle today and why that has tremendous implications in your health and the health of your children. Time magazine, one of the most serious magazines in the planet, they came out with an article of a concept that we are going to learn today. And that is the word epigenetics. In a minute I'll explain it to you and you will understand very well why I mean by epigenetics. But quoting the magazine of Time, it says, the new science of epigenetics reveals how the choices you make can what? Change. Even what? Your genes and those of your kids. So, in the old times, when we finally discovered how the DNA was set up, the persons that discovered these actually got themselves a nice Oscar for their discovery. They discovered that DNA had a certain predisposition to predict what was going to happen in the life of the person. And in the past, we thought that these genes, whatever is there, it was going to happen for sure. But now we understand that things change. For example, how does the body knows what to do? And let me use this illustration to understand the concept of epigenetics. See, let me tell you an interesting fact. Every single cell in your body, okay, the cells of your feet, the cells in your liver, the cells in your brain, every single cell in your body has the same DNA. The DNA has the instructions of how to make every single one of your organs. Now, think about it. If I have the same DNA, I have the same map and same instructions of how to make a brain here, but I also have the same instructions of how to make a brain here where my liver is, how come I don't have my liver here? Do you see the challenge? How come I don't have my liver in my feet? it has the same instructions there. How come there's a feet there and not a brain? That is exactly the concept of epigenetics. Epigenetics, what it tries to do, it turns on and turns off the genes according to the need that they have. For example, I need brain here. So what does my body did when I was in the womb of my mother? It turned on the genes for my brain, but it turned off the genes of liver, it turned off the genes of kidney, etc., etc. And that's the way that every single creature is formed. I need genes for nose, therefore I turn off the other rest of the genes. I just turn on the genes that are needed for that. It is an extremely and fascinating and complicated concept. Now, we are understanding that all of the genetic code has important information. In the past, we thought that we only had the genes, and then between each genes, there was some sort of code that we didn't understand, and they called that code junk DNA. But now we know it's no junk. It is actually very important, because that junk actually helps us to control the rest of the genes. So, with that code, we can turn on and turn off according to the need that we have. And these epigenetics help us to understand better how this process takes place. And the DNA is set up in a way that whatever I need is open and available, and the rest of the code of DNA that I don't know, I put it away, nicely packaged, each one of them. So, look at what this published article on the journal Nutritional mentioned. What does have the biggest influence on these epigenetic switches according to this article? What is it? What you and I eat. Scientists are understanding that diet is one of the things that has a bigger influence on your health regarding your genes. So, we learned that those epigenetic switches, they turn on and they turn off when we were being grown inside the womb of our mother. But now we understand that those switches continue later in life. So see, most of the diseases of today have a genetic origin. So, for example, somebody that has diabetes, certain genes turn on, certain genes turn off, and that's the reason why the person ends up with diabetes. There were some switches there that turn on and off. And see, it's important to understand what do we mean by turning on and off. When we use that term, what do we really mean by turning on or turning off? Well, let's take a trip inside of a cell to understand that. This, where we're going to enter, is inside a cell, inside the nucleus of the cell. Inside the nucleus of the cell, we have something that is called the DNA. Here is all the recipes of all the functions, of all the organs of the body. And see, in order to start that process, and when we say turn on, this is what happens. A micro machine comes and it opens up this DNA. Now, another micro machine assembles and it starts making a copy of this genetic code, this DNA, into something that we call the RNA. Once that copy is made, that copy needs to go outside the nucleus. First, it will identify itself at the door. Then it goes outside of the body, outside of the nucleus, excuse me. And outside of the nucleus, there is another micro machine that it's going to assemble, and now we need to interpret this. So, bring in this code that is complementary to this. When it matches, there is down here a protein that starts to form. Okay? So, we're reading the genetic code and we are making a protein out of this. This is fascinating, isn't it? And extremely, extremely complex. So, the genetic code is coming here, the resulting protein is coming out on this side. Once this is done, now there's another micro machine that is going to help us to fold this genetic code. And in parentheses, if there is one little mistake in the folding, it is no good. The body cannot use this protein. So everything needs to be done exactly to the point that it should be. And then the body continues to fold this, and when it's ready, it goes out of the micro machine, and there is another micro machine that serves as a little truck to carry this protein whatever is needed. Isn't this fascinating? I mean, and this is happening in such a small scale, we don't even have a microscope to see this with our own human eyes. And this is happening constantly inside of your body. It is something absolutely mind-boggling. So whenever we say the gene turned on, that's exactly what we mean. There's some genetic code that starts running there, and a copy and a protein, and as a result of that, certain function of the body happens, certain function of the body turns off. So whenever I need to make that genetic copy, my DNA opens up. And when I don't need to be making copies, I can pack this DNA like this. And the thing of it is that if you were to put the DNA in a linearly form, straight, you would actually end up with 2 meters of DNA. Fascinating, isn't it? How 2 meters of DNA is able to compact in a little cell that you cannot even see with your eyes. Isn't this technology amazing? So, we know very well that, as the title of this article says, epigenetics is what? At the center of modern medicine. See, why this is important? Because we said most of the modern diseases have their origin at the genetic level. And now, with the science of epigenetics, now we know that there are certain switches that are turning on the disease. There are certain switches that are turning off the disease. That's why we try to understand as much as possible this. And see, it is important to understand that this genetic positioning is very important. How you have those switches you actually inherit. So by switch, imagine the switch of your light. I can turn on the switch is in the on position, light goes on. the switch is in off position, light goes off. In the same way, depending in many instances of your lifestyle choices, you may turn on certain disease genes. And see, that doesn't only affect you, but you actually inherit those switches towards disease to your children, or if you have a good lifestyle, you will inherit genes towards health for your children. Do you see the importance of understanding this? So let me share with you some of the latest research of how lifestyle is so important at manipulating the genes using these epigenetics. There is this special type of mice that is called the agouti mouse. And this mouse is an extremely expensive mouse. It is a very sick mouse. This mouse develops obesity very easy. This mouse develops diabetes. This mouse has high cholesterol. So why would you pay such an expensive price for such a sick mouse? You may ask. Well, pharmaceutical companies, for example, like to have this type of mice. They can go ahead and test their medications and see if they actually lower the cholesterol, or are they lowering the blood pressure, or what's happening with the medication. Well, scientists run a very interesting experiment. They got these mice and they put them in a good lifestyle program. They put them in the 8-week depression recovery program. They gave them good nutrition, they gave them exercise, and the whole package. When the mice was pregnant, and you know what happened? The genes for disease of this mouse actually turned off. And this is the son of that mouse. This mouse was no longer obese. This mouse no longer had high blood pressure or diabetes or high cholesterol or any of these problems. The genes of this mouse actually changed. And check this out, what it says here in the study. These changes actually were inherited to the 3rd and 4th generation. Do you see the importance of what we're learning? Your choices of today have implications to your 3rd and 4th generation. To me, I was very surprised when I read this study, because I like to myself read the Bible, and in the Bible it mentions that there is to the 3rd and 4th generation also. I don't know if Moses, whoever, that's the one that wrote that phrase there, I don't know if he had a PhD in genetics from Harvard University, or I don't know how he knew that, because now we know that the epigenetic switches actually get inherited to the 3rd and 4th generation. So your good habits or your bad habits, that's the way that they're going to be inherited. Now, the opposite is also true, which is the worrisome part. In this study that was also published in the famous Journal of Neuroscience, they got these mouse, and these mice, they did the opposite. Pregnant females, they actually gave them a very bad diet. Lots of junk food with lots of fat, very high animal products. And you know what happened? When the mice were born, these mice were severely sick mice because they found an interesting behavior. These mice that were born of these mothers that had this horrible diet, these mice naturally crave junk food. They would put in options, good, wholesome food, or junk food, and the mice naturally had pleasure in eating junk food. Do you see the worrisome part that we're facing as society? As more of these restaurants, McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and so forth, start educating these mothers and fathers, the inheritance of that is children that start to seek that type of wrong nutrition. And that didn't only affect their taste buds, their brain changed, but also their health changed because they were having the wrong type of diet. And then this very fascinating study also published in the scientific literature. In fact, I'm actually involved at the moment in a similar study. We're doing a very similar study, but where we're going to do it with a bigger number of participants. In this study, they had 30 people, males that had cancer of the prostate. And instead of following the normal treatment for somebody that has cancer of the prostate, what they did is that they applied lifestyle interventions. And let me share with you how powerful lifestyle interventions are at changing things at the genetic level. So what they did, in order to demonstrate what they were doing in this study, they took biopsies of this prostate. They took a biopsy the first day when they started the study, and they took another biopsy 3 months later at the end of the study. And with this biopsy, you take a little piece of tissue there, they ran genetic analysis to start identifying genes there. What the position of the genes were, which switches were on, which switches were off. And what was this lifestyle intervention? It was a plant-based diet with exercise, with stress management, with exercise, and with many counselors, so they could have access to good information about how to implement these changes for the next 3 months. And look at the fabulous thing that happened as a result of that. Let me tell you how to interpret this chart. Do you see these weird codes that are here? Each one of these are genes. Genes have strange names, but that's each one of those genes. And then you see here the before they started with the lifestyle interventions, and you see the post at the end of the 3-month period. 3 months is actually not too long of a time. But look at the fantastic thing that happened. This line is participant number 1 matched against participant number 2. Do you see the change in color that happened? Do you see one is like more red, the other one is more green? See, when something becomes green, it means that the gene turned on. When you see that something is red, the gene is off. So look at what happened, and then I'm quoting here from the research paper. 400 genes that were associated with cancer were turned off or down. And 50 genes associated with cancer inhibition were turned on or off. Fascinating, isn't it? So whenever you have a cancer, you have these two players, these two big groups of genes. There is a group of genes that promote the cancer growth, okay? And this study turned off those genes that promote cancer growth. And also, you have another group of genes that actually inhibit cancer. So when somebody develops cancer, they actually stop those inhibitors of cancer so that the cancer is able to grow. But what happened in this study? In this study, those genes related to cancer inhibition were turned on or up. Do you think this is good news? This is fantastic news, isn't it? So this is just related to cancer. This is exactly what happens when you switch to a plant-based diet. You start getting this type of benefits in you. And you know, it is very important to have good, healthy habits. Yesterday we were mentioning how circadian rhythms, you know, your sleep cycles are very important. This study demonstrates that irrefutably. How, whenever somebody is cheating regarding their sleep, there is very negative consequences. This was also published in the scientific literature from a university in England. What they did is that they took two groups of volunteers, and one group of volunteers only slept less than 6 hours a night. That in parentheses is something very common, especially among young people. Many of them have this type of program. And another group, what they did is that they were sleeping the 10 hours, you know, which is a good amount. And after they did that, they put these people to be awakened for 40 hours. But check this out. Those people that had not slept well, 6 hours or less, what happened to their genes? 711 of different genes related to their health were affected as a result of sleep deprivation, not for long periods of time, but just a week of bad sleep turned on those genes towards disease. Do you see the importance of lifestyle? See, you cannot be taking shortcuts on your lifestyle and expect to be nice and healthy, because you start with your choices turning on or off those switches towards disease or health. This is another study that they did. In this one, they got a group of volunteers and they did something very simple. They put them to do exercise for only 20 minutes. It's not like a long time, you know. This is a short time. In fact, you should actually target more towards 45 minutes of exercise. That would be a better dose. But still, 20 minutes is good enough for this study. In this study, what they did is the volunteers did their 20 minutes of exercise, and then they took the biopsy of the muscle. And they saw that the genes of health turned on with only 20 minutes of exercise. And it was not only an immediate effect, this effect lasted for hours. Do you see the blessing of doing 20 minutes of exercise a day? This is one of the experts on epigenetics, Dr. Giroux. And look at what he says. Epigenetics is proving that we have some responsibility for the integrity of our genome. Before, we thought that genes predetermine outcomes. Now, everything we do, everything we eat or smoke can affect our gene expression and that of our future generations. Epigenetic introduces the concept of what? Of free will into our idea of genetics. So not because you had parents that were diseased, that doesn't mean that you need to be diseased. Even if you inherited some of the challenges of the diseases of your parents, still with your free will, changes can happen. And I want you to understand genetics in this illustration. Genetics is like a gun that has the bullet inside. But what happened with the gun? Does it shoot by itself? Somebody needs to pull the trigger. See, your habits is what is going to end up pulling the trigger of disease. So, this is our modern understanding of disease. Now we know that 70% of your health depends on what? On the lifestyle that you are having. So please don't go and blame the doctor. Okay? Doctor is only 10% of the problem. Okay? It is your choices in reality what will determine your health or your sickness. And DNA sequence only 10% and the environment 10%. So it is important to understand that the nutrition that you have and the lifestyle that you have are going to change those genes, and if you change your genes, you're actually going to change your health and your future as you apply these principles and as they become something permanent for you. And let me share with you how epigenetics is actually the answer to some of the most common health problems that Iceland is facing. For example, in this study published in one of the best journals for medicine, the New England Journal of Medicine, they were showing something extremely interesting. There is a surgery, very, very commonly done every single day here in Iceland, which is called the bypass surgery. The bypass surgery is an extremely traumatic surgery. What they do, they go ahead and cut open your thorax. They have these big things where they cut off. Okay? You open the thorax, you expose the heart. Okay? Heart is just pumping there. You actually switch the circulation for a little bit, and by switching the circulation, in parentheses, you're actually causing micro strokes. I don't know if you've ever seen a person that has been through bypass surgery. Their personality changes in many instances due to the fact of those micro strokes that happen during the surgery. But anyhow, they're not done. They're going to get a knife and they're going to open up their leg all the way from the bottom all the way to the top. Okay? And from there, they're going to get a blood vessel. Okay? They're going to cut it off. And then that blood vessel, what they're going to do, they're going to sew up that blood vessel to bypass those arteries that are close up. And then once you do that, now you put everything back together and then you close the thorax and you leave a big scar this size there where the heart is. And what they were showing in this study is that after that surgery, for people that have atherosclerosis, the blockage of the arteries, what we were talking at the very beginning, even after such traumatic procedure, within 20 to 18 months, what happened to the surgery? The surgery fails in about 40 to 50% of the people that did that procedure. That is really bad news, isn't it? Now, some people say, but doctor, changing my diet is too radical. What is more radical, this type of surgery or changing your diet? Put things into perspective. Let me show you why I would suggest you change your diet with another published study. In this published study, they were showing how an artery that is diseased, this is an artery of the heart, and this artery is very diseased. See the diameter, how it decreases a lot here? Okay. All these black plaque that you cannot see is a huge plaque of atherosclerosis, similar to what the lady that we were seeing at the very beginning. Okay? Now, what did this person did, this is the same person, to open up that artery? Do you see now it's open? Do you see the huge difference between this and that? Well, let's read the result of that study, what this person did to open an artery in that way without the need of a traumatic surgery like the bypass surgery. And I'm reading. As a still study, in parentheses, he is one of the co-authors of this book that I wrote, The Rethink Food. He writes in that book. In the arteries of the heart, after 32 months of what happened, what they were eating, a plant-based diet without cholesterol-lowering medication showing profound improvement. This is exactly from the article that they published. Do you see what happened? Atherosclerosis reversed. Now you're experts in epigenetics. You can even tell me why this happened. What happened? Disease genes were turned on and health genes were turned on, and then reversal took place. See, if you live in Iceland and you're eating the typical Icelandic diet, I can tell you something. You may have already challenges with atherosclerosis. How come I know this? Because heart disease is one of the top killers here in Iceland. And see, the person that gets a heart attack is not because they became lucky at that moment. This happened many years before. Those arteries were closing up. The body was trying its best to keep the arteries open, and it came a moment in which heart attack. So we have learned a lot this afternoon, isn't it? We learned that whenever a mice is pregnant, if we change radically their lifestyle, those effects of health or disease can actually last to the third and fourth generation. Also, we learned that whenever somebody changes their diet for bad, actually those effects change literally the brain of the children so that they want to seek more of a junk type of diet. We also learned that changing radically to a plant-based diet will actually switch off more than 450 genes that are involved with cancer. And we also learned that small dose of exercise, actually of 20 minutes, can have a lasting effect, lasting for hours in the health of the person. So let me share with you what is happening with our modern society. Let me share with you an example in Mexico City. This picture is of an artist that used to like to paint the life of the people that lived long time ago in Mexico. Now, how many obese Indians do you count there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many do you have? Zero. Not even a single one of them. Yet today, if you analyze the health of the people in Mexico, after some terrorists in these boats came to the Americas, they brought things to that continent that were never there. Are you aware that these Europeans brought pigs to the continent? There were no pigs in the continent of America. They brought goats. There were no goats. They brought cows. There were no cows there. They brought chickens. There were no chickens in that continent. And the people there changed their lives. And today, a lot of the people living there in Latin America have issues with their weight. And And this is a big public health emergency because diseases like diabetes are just running rampant everywhere. Now, my wife and I had the opportunity of going to Africa in many occasions. And you know, in Africa, you see a little glimpse of how the lifestyle of the West used to be long time ago. Because things there still are quite primitive, especially as you go away from the cities. Where we were, people didn't have access to electricity, people didn't have access to running water, so everything was physical activity. There's no bus that comes and picks up these children and takes them to school. How do they get there? They walk, some of them, for kilometers and kilometers. And you know, we were doing health lectures and different types of lectures there in different areas. And I can tell you, there were entire schools where there was not a single child with obesity there. And don't tell me, well, doctor, don't you know that people are dying of hunger there? Not necessarily. These kids are eating enough. Yes, once in a while, a problem family, alcoholic family, father, and problematic, and challenges of that kind. But most of these children do eat enough. And many times they would invite us to eat there. What do they eat? A very, very simple diet. This is what they were eating here in this time that they invited me to eat. They had a pot of beans here, some sort of avocado that they put together here, some sort of tortillas that they made there, some fruit and some sauce. That's exactly the food that they ate. See, the amount of animal product that they eat there is very minimal. Because nobody has the money to be killing their cow or goat every day. The resources are not just there. And yes, you know, once in a while they go and catch a monkey and eat it, you know. But let me tell you, catching a monkey is not the easiest thing to do. You know? They're actually quite fast, these monkeys. So that doesn't happen every day. So this is not like they're healthy oriented, that's why they have this diet, but that's what the food that they have available. And you know, heart disease in this area is unknown. As scientists come and check the arteries of these people living the simple lifestyle, many of the diseases that are causing huge problems in the Western world are just unknown. These people are dying of simple things like malaria, like lack of hygiene, parasites, infections, and so forth. And you know, something I noticed there is that there is no markets around there. People don't go and shop their food. So what do they eat? They eat what the ground yields. So this is an everyday thing. Everybody has their home, and around their home they have a big field, and you see them there working day after day, and that actually is a blessing. That's exactly what your ancestors did in the old days. Everybody was busy growing their own food. And every home surrounded them, you're going to see a lot of plantations because they know that if they don't work, they're going to go hungry. But you know, these same people with the same genetic makeup, as they change their environment, what is the result? The result is disaster. See, the ancestors of her had that simple lifestyle. But as you change the diet, as you change the level of activity, then you get into big trouble. So it is important to establish good lifestyle habits because these lifestyle habits can have a big impact. For example, in this study where they were using this as a guideline for good studies, they were actually predicting mortality of the people. How do you interpret this chart? For example, somebody that was following 0 to 2 of these 7 habits, and they had 20 years, in reality they didn't have 20 years. They had 34 years. But you know, somebody that had the 7 habits and were 70 years old, they didn't have 70 years old. They had almost 50 years. You subtract 18.2. What are those 7 habits, doctor? Yeah, these are those 7 habits. You need to implement good lifestyle habits, because in that way you're going to turn on or you're going to turn off the genes for these things. So one challenge that many people have is that they say, you know, doctor, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. But you know, I don't have the will to make these changes. What am I going to do? I tried before, you know, I tried and then boom, I fell back. And I can tell you, studies show that, for example, if you do a stop smoking program and you don't put some sort of spiritual help, the people are not going to quit the smoking. And Alcoholics Anonymous knows that very well. If you ever go to one of those meetings, you're going to hear about the 12 steps. Are you familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous? Big blessing, isn't it, to help people stop drinking. And you're going to see that you need to understand that you need some external power in order to make these changes in a permanent way. And you need to understand that that way you can make these changes lasting. And you know, I don't know how many of you have participated in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I can tell you, if you go to that meeting, they're going to repeat you this over and over. I can do all things with His help. And as you repeat this in your mind, this is going to make a big impact in you. So, may you have those changes, and may you be able to implement this at the long term so that you can be healthy. I hope to see you tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about one of the most important topics, and that is the topic of inflammation. If you were to ask me, doctor, from the 3 most important things that I need to learn, what do I need to learn? I could tell you, you need to learn about inflammation, because inflammation either will destroy your health or will make you healthy. In parentheses, before closing, I just wanted to mention that I received an invitation to speak at this place this Saturday, that you guys are more than welcome. I get invitations all the time to speak to all types of audiences. For example, from here, from Iceland, I'm actually flying to Abu Dhabi. You know, there's this Muslim country there in the Middle East. I don't mind talking to them. And then from Abu Dhabi, I'm going to Singapore. You know, some Vegetarian Society from Singapore is inviting me to speak. So I would invite you to come to these meetings. We're going to be dealing with the topic of rest, and also we're going to be dealing with the topic of longevity. And they were telling me there's some sort of food there between each of those 2 meetings.